world of skateboarding, shoes aren't just gear, they're identity. The shoes you wore said everything about who you backed, what crew you rolled with, and where you fit in the scene. From the late 90s into the 2000s, some brands completely ran the show. They had the teams, the ads, the videos, everything. But skate culture moves fast, and what was cool one year could be cringe the next. This isn't about throwing hate. It's about showing love to the brands that had their moment, defined an era, and then, whether from bad business, changing styles, or just timing, fell off hard. Some of these names are still barely hanging on. Others disappeared without a trace. But all of them shaped skateboarding in one way or another. So if you remember D3s, triple tongues, or lacing your shoes through the side holes, you're in the right place. Let's kick it off with one of the loudest, boldest, and most unforgettable names in skate shoe history, Osiris. At one point, no skate shoe was louder, bulkier, or more in your face than Osiris. And no model summed up that energy better than the D3. Released in 1999, the Osiris D3 became one of the most recognizable shoes of the 2000s, not just in skate shops, but in malls, music videos, and even mainstream fashion. Though Dave Mayhew was the name most associated with the D3, the design credit belongs primarily to Brian Reed, co-founder of Osiris. Reed handled the actual construction and styling of the shoe, blending elements from hiking boots and athletic sneakers to create something totally over the top. Mayhew contributed ideas during the early concept phase, but it was Reed who brought the design to life, and Mayhew who made it iconic by wearing it in videos, magazines, and contests during its peak. The D3 didn't just stand out, it took over. Massive layered panels, lace loops everywhere, and a tongue that looked like body armor. It was a tank on your feet. For a while, that overbuilt look was the culture. Everyone from park rats to hip-hop heads rocked them. You didn't even have to skate to wear Osiris. And that was both a blessing and a curse. The shoe blew up during skateboarding's early 2000s boom and became a crossover hit during the rise of mall skate fashion. You'd see them in Zoomies, Journeys, and even outside the action sports world entirely. Osiris leaned into the chaos. Their team included heavy hitters like Jerry Shue, Tyrone Olsen, and Josh Casper. Their 1999 video, The Storm, matched the energy of the brand, fast-paced, chaotic, and unapologetically loud. But by the mid-2000s, skateboarding changed. Slimmer vulcanized shoes like the Vans Era and America Reynolds 3 became the standard. Osiris didn't evolve. The D3's design quickly went from iconic to ironic. Skaters mocked the bulk. The brand slipped from core credibility to meme status. Osiris tried to bring it back, with reissues, updates like the D3 NTX, and nostalgia marketing. But the energy never returned. Still, the legacy is undeniable. The D3 wasn't just a shoe, it was a statement. Oversized, overhyped, and unforgettable. Love it or laugh at it, Osiris earned its spot in skate history. In the early 2000s, DC Shoes wasn't just one of the biggest names in skateboarding, it was the name.
Biggest skateboarding shoe and clothing company in the world, DC Shoes.
Founded in 1994 by Ken Block and Damon Way, the brand exploded with a mix of smart marketing, heavy team riders, and a no-compromise approach to performance gear. By the time most people saw the DC video in 2003, it felt like DC had leveled up the entire skate industry. Their team was stacked with icons. Danny Way jumping the Great Wall of China. Rob Dyrdek playing both athlete and entrepreneur. Josh Callis holding down Love Park. Stevie Williams pushing street style forward. It wasn't just skateboarding. It was skateboarding with budget, ambition, and polish. They built private parks, dropped massive ad campaigns, and blended performance with lifestyle in a way few brands had pulled off before. But with that rise came exposure, and eventually, overexposure. DC's success caught the attention of big money. In 2004, the brand was bought by Quicksilver in a deal worth over $87 million. For a while, nothing seemed to change. DC kept producing gear, sponsoring events, and running skate tours. But behind the scenes, things were shifting. The brand started chasing the action sports boom. Snowboarding, motocross, rally. Shoes started popping up in mainstream stores, and the designs got louder, chunkier, and more mass market. By the late 2000s, the shift was clear. DC was no longer just a skate brand. It was an action sports brand. And for core skaters, that was a red flag. What once felt authentic now felt bloated. Their skate team slowly lost its edge. As brands like Lakai, America, and Nike SB started gaining ground with more technical shoes and cleaner aesthetics, DC's oversized silhouettes and flashy branding started to feel dated. Even Rob Dyrdek, one of the faces of the brand, had shifted into TV stardom with Rob and Big and Fantasy Factory. The core skate world had changed, and DC didn't feel like it was changing with it. DC shoes never fully disappeared. They still drop collections, still sponsor skaters, and still have name recognition. But in terms of cultural impact, they're nowhere near where they once were. What was once a leader in core skateboarding is now seen by many as a legacy brand that got too big, too corporate, and too comfortable. They were untouchable at their peak. But staying there? That's where they slipped. Globe was never the loudest brand in skateboarding. It wasn't flashy like Osiris or mainstream like DC. But for a while, it was one of the most respected. If you wanted shoes that could take a beating and didn't fall apart after a month, Globe was your brand. And if you needed credibility, you had Rodney Mullen. Mullen didn't just wear Globe shoes, he elevated them. His presence gave Globe instant legitimacy. Whether it was his mind-bending parts in Rodney versus Day One, or his smooth precision and opinion, Globe was on his feet. That mattered. A lot. Globe leaned into that clean, technical energy. Their shoes weren't about hype, they were about construction. Models like the Tilt, Sabre, and CT4 were built tough, with thick padding, airbag soles, and rugged designs. They looked like they could survive a nuclear winter. And in the era of stair sets and big rails, that's exactly what people wanted. The company also knew how to tell a story. The Globe trilogy and opinion weren't just team videos. They were polished, cinematic, and helped define what a high-budget skate video could look like in the early 2000s. Guys like Matt Mumford, Chet Thomas, and Mark Appleyard gave the brand range, from hammer skating to tech flow. But when skateboarding shifted toward leaner shoes, tighter fits, and more board feel, Globe didn't pivot fast enough. The shoes that once felt indestructible now felt bulky. The style had changed, and Globe's identity didn't match the moment. They made moves, trimmed down designs, pushed deeper into surf, even dipped into the lifestyle lane. But by then, the scene had shifted. Fallen was rallying core skaters. Newer brands were leaning into street credibility and board feel. Globe's heavier style and broader focus just didn't hit the same. They weren't out of the picture, but they weren't driving the conversation anymore. The brand didn't crash, it just faded. There wasn't a scandal or a blow-up, just a slow fade into the background. You still see the name, they still make shoes. But ask any skater under 25 if Globe means something to them, and you'll probably get a shrug. For a brand built on durability, Globe held on longer than most. But in a culture that rewards evolution, staying the same eventually puts you behind. DVS wasn't the loudest brand in the game. It didn't chase headlines or drop a new collab every week. But if you were skating every day, filming VX clips and burning through shoes by the month, chances are you ran a pair of DVS. It was the working skater's shoe, affordable, built tough, and easy to find in any real skate shop. While brands like DC were blasting energy drink logos across contests, DVS just kept showing up on the feet of people who actually lived at the park. And at the center of it all, Day One's song. Day One didn't just keep DVS relevant, he carried it. Every new part he dropped reset what was possible on a skateboard, and he made the shoes look good doing it. From tech ledge lines to manual insanity, if Day One trusted DVS, a whole generation did too. They had a deep bench too. Kerry Getz, Jerron Wilson, Chico Bernays, Tori Pudwill, all riders who kept the brand grounded in real street skating. Shoes like the Getz One, Militia, and Enduro weren't hype beasts. They were dependable. Sturdy soles, solid grip, and just enough style to not look outdated. DVS wasn't trying to dominate. It was the kind of brand you picked because it worked, not because it was trending. And for a while, that was enough. But as the skate shoe game got flashier, DVS started to fall behind. They dipped into surf and moto, played with louder colorways, and tried chasing the lifestyle look. But that wasn't what people came to them for. Then came the hit. Their parent company filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Ownership changed. Shops dropped them. The team thinned out. And even though the shoes kept coming, something felt off. They never fully left, but they stopped feeling essential. Not because the product was bad, it wasn't. They just lost their place in the conversation. These days, DVS is still around, still backing skaters, still grinding it out. But that second-tier badge they wore for so long, it faded into something quieter, something easy to overlook. Still, for a solid decade, DVS was the brand holding it down for the everyday crew. No flash, no gimmicks. Just skate shoes that showed up and did their job. Circa didn't come out of the gate trying to be cool. It just was. Black shoes, red laces, skulls, bolts, and attitude. Circa felt like it came straight out of the editing bay at Misled Youth. If you were into rails, raw street skating, and Zero's no-compromise mentality, Circa was your brand. It launched in 1999, founded by Jamie Thomas and Chad Muska, right at the peak of the VHS skate video era. At that time, Circa wasn't just a shoe company, it was part of a movement. Thomas, Chris Cole, and Adrian Lopez gave the brand teeth. Their parts were brutal. Their style was stripped down and aggressive, and their shoes matched that energy. Stiff soles, reinforced sidewalls, minimal gimmicks. Circa's early success came from identity. You weren't just wearing a skate shoe, you were repping that entire zero-heavy world. Whether it was the AL50, CX201, or the Jamie Thomas Pro model, their silhouettes weren't flashy, they were functional and hard. And for a few years it worked. Circa was in every shop that mattered, every video you wanted to watch, and on the feet of every kid trying to frontboard a 10-stair. But the cracks started to show when that core team began to splinter. Jamie Thomas launched Fallen. Chris Cole eventually followed. Greco and McKay shifted focus. Without that original crew, Circa lost its anchor. And when the culture started shifting, Circa was caught in a weird spot. The industry moved toward lighter, tech-driven shoes, and the raw punk rock edge they built their name on started to feel dated. They tried to clean things up, dropping sleeker silhouettes and dipping into lifestyle design, but it felt off-brand. Circa wasn't built for polish. It was built for parking garages and crusty handrails. And once they drifted from that identity, they lost the crowd that cared. By the early 2000s and 10s, Circa felt scattered. They still had solid riders. They still put out product. But the brand no longer had a clear voice. It wasn't the zero hardcore staple it once was, and it wasn't trendy enough to grab the new crowd. Eventually, Circa disappeared from most shelves, not with a bang, just slowly fading out of relevance. But for a brief window, Circa hit different. It was raw, fast, and unapologetic. Built for slams, built for rail skaters, built for that early 2000s kid who didn't want flash, just something tough enough to take a beating. In a sea of loud logos and clunky silhouettes, S Footwear was different. It wasn't trying to dominate them all. It wasn't chasing hype. S was built for the kind of skater who cared about flick, board feel, and control. If you knew, you knew. And if you didn't, S didn't care. Launched in 1995 by Soul Technology, the same company behind Etnies in America, S quickly carved out its lane. This was the skater's skate shoe, sleek, technical, and focused on performance. While other brands were going big and bulky, S was tuning into what actually helped you skate better. The Excel became the crown jewel. Clean shape, great flick, durable as hell. You also had the Costin one, the SLB 97, the Muska Pro models, all built with purpose. Padded where you needed it, streamlined where you didn't. These were shoes designed with skaters, for skaters. And then there was Menik Madi, Released in 2000, Menikmati wasn't just a skate video. It was a global statement. The roster was heavy. Rick McCrank, Costin, Penny, Burnquist, Ardosari. It was shot beautifully, scored perfectly, and it felt more like a film than a team video. It didn't just show tricks, it showed taste. Menikmati was where S stepped out of the shadows and let the rest of the industry know. This brand isn't just legit, it's leading. But S was never interested in selling out. And in the mid-2000s, when bulkier shoes started dominating again, and lifestyle branding became king, S didn't pivot hard. They stuck to their lane, maybe to a fault. By 2012, Soltec made the call to pause S entirely. It wasn't bankrupt, it wasn't scandal-ridden, it just didn't make sense in that moment. Rather than dilute the brand with rushed collabs or off-brand drops, they stepped back. For a few years, S was gone. And in that silence, its legend kind of grew. When the brand returned in 2014 with limited releases and classic reissues, it came back with purpose. Not chasing trends, just making the shoes that made them great. S never really fell off. It just stepped aside on its own terms. In a market that constantly shifts with trends and hype, that kind of quiet exit took discipline. And when it came back, it felt earned, not forced. Fallen wasn't created to cash in. It was created because Jamie Thomas felt like skateboarding was losing its soul. Big companies were taking over. Corporate logos were everywhere. And the part of skateboarding that was earned the hard way, the part that bled for every clip, was getting pushed out. So in 2003, he launched Fallen Footwear. Not for trend chasers, not for fair weather fans. Fallen was for the skaters who didn't want to be famous, just respected. It was a brand that stood for effort, for slams, for getting back up and trying again. The shoes weren't designed to stand out. They were built to hold up. Fallen's models didn't chase trends or chase shelf space. They were low-key, durable, and made with input from skaters who lived in the streets. The Trooper, Ripper, and Patriot weren't selling style, they were selling trust. You laced them up knowing they'd last longer than your board. But what really made Fallen different was its team. Guys like Chris Cole, Tommy Sandoval, Billy Marks, and James Hardy weren't just repping the brand. They were the brand. These were skaters who put in the work, stacked parts year after year, and stuck with Fallen even when it wasn't the biggest name on the wall. That loyalty was powerful, but it also came at a cost. While other brands adjusted their image and softened their edges to stay marketable, Fallen never flinched. It stayed rooted in raw street skating, even as the industry shifted toward lifestyle marketing and clean-cut image plays. That commitment made it harder to compete, but compromise was never part of the plan. So in 2016, rather than water things down or chase trends that didn't fit, Jamie Thomas made the call to shut it down. He didn't sell out. He didn't rebrand. He stepped away. And in that moment, Fallen became something bigger than a company. It became a symbol of sticking to your guns, of not watering things down just to survive. In 2018, Fallen returned under new ownership, with Thomas still involved, and many original riders back on board. They've dropped reissues, new models, and still keep it rooted in the same principles honoring what made the brand matter in the first place. So, while Fallen is still around in 2025, with a loyal following and a focus on core skate values, it's not as widely popular as it was in the 2000s. Fallen didn't fall off, it just refused to bend. And in a world full of compromises, that made it one of the realest skate shoe brands to ever do it. When Super dropped, it didn't look like anything else in skateboarding. It wasn't trying to be low-key or blend in at the shop. It was loud, tall, and unapologetically different. For better or worse, it was a brand that came in swinging. And for a while, it worked. Launched in 2006 by Angel Kabata, one of the co-founders of Crew, Super came out of the gate with a mission: disrupt. And nobody embodied that more than Chad Muska. He wasn't just the team's biggest name. He was the face, the voice, and the style behind the whole thing. The Skytop, his pro model, wasn't just a shoe, it was a statement. High top, bold lines, premium materials. Skaters either loved it or hated it. Sneakerheads, though, they couldn't get enough. Supra blurred the line between skateboarding and fashion in a way no other brand had before. Suddenly you had Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, and Justin Bieber rocking Supra shoes. They were showing up in nightclubs and music videos, places skate shoes had never really gone. That mainstream explosion turned Supra into a full-blown cultural moment. But with all that flash came fallout. Core skaters started questioning the brand's direction. The focus shifted from function to fashion. Skate models were getting crowded out by lifestyle drops and colorway collabs. The team, which once included heavy names like Tom Penny, Eric Ellington, Jim Greco, and Terry Kennedy, began to lose its grip on the brand's identity. It wasn't that the shoes were bad, it was that the brand stopped feeling like skateboarding. Supra leaned so far into hype culture that it forgot what built its foundation. And once the novelty wore off, so did the momentum. By the late 2000s and 10s, Supra was fading. Retail presence shrunk, team riders bounced. In 2020, the brand officially shut down. There were whispers of a relaunch, but nothing ever hit with the same force. Still, for a few wild years, Supra made skate shoes feel like sneakers, and sneakers feel like status. The Skytop became a symbol of where skateboarding could go, for better or worse. Supra didn't just fall off, it flew too close to the sun. And in doing so, it became one of the boldest, most talked about chapters in skate shoe history. At one point in the early 2000s, audio was everywhere. Bam Margera wore them, Brian Deegan wore them, you saw them in Jackass, Viva La Bam, and video games like Tony Hawk's Underground. They had a street team feel with TV-level exposure, and for a few years that combo made audio one of the biggest names in skate shoes. The brand launched in 1998 with a clean, technical vibe. It had legit riders, Jeremy Ray, Steve Barra, Ed Saligo, Kenny Anderson, and released solid video parts that backed up the name. Their shoes were functional, decent quality, and relatively no frills, but where audio really blew up was in the crossover space, outside the core skate scene. As Bam Margera became a household name through MTV, so did audio. Suddenly you had kids who didn't skate rocking audio shoes just because they saw them on TV. The brand leaned into that wave, embracing the punk MTV hybrid energy, signing freestyle moto riders, and cashing in on big-name visibility. But that visibility came at a cost. Core skaters never fully embraced audio. It didn't have the underground credibility of a brand like Fallen or the innovation of S. It felt more like a media product than a skate movement. And when the MTV shine wore off, audio didn't have the roots to fall back on. The real turning point came when audio started showing up on the shelves at discount shoe stores. It wasn't a sale or a rebrand, just a distribution shift that instantly killed the vibe. Core shops dropped them, riders left, and once their shoes were sitting next to clearance runners under fluorescent lighting, the message was clear. Audio wasn't a skate brand anymore, at least not one that the scene could take seriously. By the early 2000s and 10s, audio was barely hanging on. There were some relaunch attempts, and a few legacy skaters still repped them for nostalgia, but the momentum was gone. The brand that once felt like a household name vanished from the conversation just as fast as it entered. Still, for a quick moment, audio captured a very specific era in skateboarding. The MTV boom, the crossover craze, the Jackass generation. It was loud, it was visible, and then it was gone. Audio didn't fade quietly. It cashed out early, hit the mainstream hard, and disappeared just as fast. A cultural moment, not a legacy. For a long time, America stood on its own. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't follow whatever was trending, but it didn't need to. The team, the shoes, the edits, they all spoke the same language. Pure, uncompromised skateboarding. If you were about the streets, the clips, and the crew, America had you. Their roots go back to the Soltec family alongside Etnies and S Footwear. But America had its own feel. Rougher, heavier, more underground. It wasn't trying to hit the mainstream, it was built for the core. And for a while, the entire scene backed it. Shoes like the Reynolds one, Herman G6, and Leo Romero Laced became staples. Simple, durable, and perfect for street skating. The gear matched the mindset, built for hammers, not hype. But it was the videos that really cemented America's place in skate history. This is skateboarding. Stay gold. made. Each one was a moment. From Andrew Reynolds stomping frontside flips to Heath Kirchart's haunting retirements, these weren't just clips. They were cinematic, emotional, and honest. No brand captured the soul of skating quite like America did. And yet, the spotlight faded. There wasn't a breaking point, just time passing. Videos slowed down. The team got quieter. Styles shifted, and the spotlight moved on. While other brands retooled, rebranded, and chased momentum, America stuck with what felt honest. The same riders, the same tone, the same weight behind every part. That consistency earned loyalty, but it came at a price. In a scene that rewards reinvention and constant motion, staying grounded can start to feel like standing still. They still make great shoes. They still have a loyal following. And they still represent something a lot of skaters wish the industry hadn't moved past. The name carries weight, but it's not pulling headlines. Still, for anyone who watched Stay Gold on repeat or laced up Reynolds ones for every session, America will always be more than a brand. It was a standard, and for a lot of skaters, it still is. And that's the thing. Skateboarding moves fast, trends flip, teams change, shops close, some brands reinvent, others just hang on. But every one of these companies helped shape an era. For a while, they were everywhere. On decks, in videos, on your feet. Some stood for grit, others chased hype, a few tried to do both, and whether they crashed, faded, or just slipped off the radar, they all left a mark. Because skate shoes weren't just shoes, they were identity. The brand you backed said something about how you skated, who you watched, and where you felt you fit in. And when a brand lost its way, you felt it. Want more stories like this? We've got a full breakdown on the rise and fall of DC shoes, one of the wildest brand stories in action sports. Thanks for watching and stay wicked.